Welcome. You are listening to The Travel Winds, hosted by Pete Kotzbach. This is a weekly interview show about people who travel for work and all the ups and downs that go along with it. Here we go.
Hey, welcome to the Travel Winds podcast. Today, my guest is Mike McVay. He's the president, founder, CEO of McVay Consulting. How many, I don't even want to guess, 40 plus years in the radio business.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. You would be safe to say 50 years in the radio business, because I was 15 when I started.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean,
back in those days, it was easier to get into video.
Or harder, right? I don't know. I mean,
it was before consolidation, so radio was a very mom and pop business then.
Oh, okay.
And so that's how I started at 15 while I was a kid in high school.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, I'd love talking to you because it's interesting to hear. It's always interesting to talk to somebody that's gone through different cycles of business. And I think the radio business has gone through massive upheavals, and yet you're still very bullish on it and still traveling quite a bit for your consulting business.
Yeah, and my consulting, to be honest, the consulting business has evolved greatly over the years. I mean, when I started in 1984, it was all radio. And along the way, we have grown to consult radio and podcasting and streaming. And I coach on-air talent. I coach public speakers, work with singers and songwriters. I've worked with some big names you would know and some names that are new and young people upcoming. And so my entire shift in focus has been on media.
Right.
So, and so that includes social media as well. And so that's been the evolution. It was one thing when it was just radio and TV.
Yeah.
And there's so many more things.
Well, that's the whole premise behind even my podcast. It wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. You know,
sure.
Just the technology to be able to talk to you remotely and then put it together and put it out on the air is crazy.
In a lot of ways, podcasting was books on audio, if you think about it.
Yeah, it was.
But you know, today podcasting has hobbyists, and then there are people like yourselves that have businesses built on it. And so it's really varied and changed a lot. And it's all about having great content and distribution and promotion to get people to download it and follow.
Yeah. And great guests.
Yeah, like me.
There you go. You know, I didn't know until just talking to you before we aired, you know, Cleveland being the home of rock and roll, Alan Freed, radio, DJ, coining the name and everything. Is that how you ended up in Cleveland, or how do you end up in the North Ohio area?
Well, I mean, I grew up outside of Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
And so like where Pennsylvania, Maryland, and West Virginia come together, I grew up at the foothills to the Appalachian Range there and listened to Pittsburgh radio, wanted to become an on-air talent, got a job on air, like I say, in one of the suburban stations when I was 15.
Yeah.
Worked my way up. Wanted to be a program director and morning person. Program directors are responsible for everything that comes out of the speakers. And so
where they should be.
Yeah, where they should be. Yeah.
Per your 40 tips for a good PD.
Yeah, that's good. You read my Radio Inc. article. Thank you. But so I worked in Wheeling, West Virginia, and it's much like a baseball player or a G League player in the NBA. You're working your way up to develop.
Yep.
So I did Wheeling and Charleston and Louisville, San Diego, LA, Cleveland. I came to Cleveland because I wanted to be a general manager and to run a radio property. And I was doing exactly that for about 90 days. And the ownership changed the stations. And I was unhappy and didn't like what they had done. And so one of the times that I allowed my ego and my personality to get in the way, and I went, I'm going to leave.
Yeah.
And it ended up being very good, actually. I went to Mobile, Alabama, where I was a market manager, a general manager of a radio station, legendary station called WABB. And the owner was a legend who had run the stations himself before hiring me. And so I had a year there of learning.
Perfect.
And then I moved back to Cleveland and ran 2 radio stations when they sold about a year later, I was only there for maybe a little over a year and a half. I started McVay Media. And by the way, I was never out of work. The new owners wanted me to stay. I wanted to control my own destiny. I was tired of people selling or buying radio stations or changing the format. And so I started McVay Media.
That's what I was going to ask you too, is, at some point, like I'm an outside sales rep and things can change on the fly. Radio business, as much as it's changed over the decades, if you want to raise a family, how have you been able to balance raising your daughters and having a family life while all of a sudden your job could be gone the next day?
Yeah, my wife is an amazingly strong person.
There you go.
And I give her the credit. Plus, I had two daughters. We have two daughters. And so they've always been close to their mom. But I would do crazy things. I would fly from Seattle on a red eye on a Friday when work was done to be back in time to take the kids to soccer on Saturday and, do all the other things over the weekend on Sunday before flying back out on Monday.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've done the same thing where you make amazing adjustments. Along the way, I bought some radio stations. I know you mentioned Hawaii. I owned a couple stations in Honolulu for a while.
Oh, there you go. Good reason to go over and visit.
Yeah, but when I did that, the bank, we owned in Naples, Florida, and Key West, Florida. And my idea was to buy resort markets.
That's what I was looking at, yeah.
And the bank reached out and said, hey, we've got some properties in Honolulu that, we could, that are in financial trouble. We need somebody to come in and run them, maybe be our partner and make this work. And so I agreed to do that. And they said, but we need you to be there once a month. You need to spend a week a month in Hawaii. And at first blush, that sounds fabulous.
Yeah, until you figure out it's a 9-hour flight.
Yeah, and I was like, yeah, done, deal.
Yeah.
But then after a year of, flying, you'd fly from Cleveland to LA, which is 5 or 6 hours.
Yeah.
Then you have an hour or two layover, and then you fly the 6 hours from LA to Honolulu. Then you go to work for the week.
And then the jet lag, because it's a 6-hour time difference.
Yeah, then you come back. And you can't get to or from Cleveland easily. And so I would almost always either end up having to spend a night in LA or take a red eye out of LA to get back to Cleveland. And so after having done that for a year, I just said to the bank, yeah, I'm going to visit once a quarter. Sorry if you don't like it. And that's what I did after that. And they were fine with that. But I ended up residing here, to your point, that our oldest daughter had just turned 5 and was starting kindergarten.
Okay.
My wife was pregnant with our second child. And that's when the radio station sold. And I just said to my wife, we're not moving anymore. I grew up in one area, didn't have to move a lot as a kid, moved a lot as an adult. My wife grew up in one area, didn't have to move a lot. She grew up downstate Ohio. And so we were just like, we're done. We're staying here.
Yeah.
So that's what we've done.
Well, you picked a beautiful place, so it's not.
Yeah, for six months a year, it's pretty good.
Yeah. I told you before, my family's just south of you, and I remember I went there. And my aunt goes, look at the lake every once in a while and see, because it was summertime. She goes, if the thunderstorms are coming, because they're supposed to come, just look over the lake. And all of a sudden, I'm like, God, it looks pretty dark over there. And before I could even get back to her house, it was a lot of rain.
Yeah, the little town we're in, which is Avon Lake, Ohio, is right on Lake Erie.
Yeah.
People will say to us, so you're on Lake Avon? And it's like, no. It goes Avon Lake, Sheffield Lake, and then south of us is a town called Avon. South of Sheffield Lake is a town called Sheffield. And so the little community that's right on the lake, they just added the words lake to it.
Yeah.
But we're not right on the lake. We're a couple blocks off. But from upstairs, we can see the lake. And I've seen water spouts on it.
Yeah. I had a lot of pictures of my dad. My dad caught a lot of, what was the fish? Not crappie. He caught a lot of fish in that lake.
They have a form of cod, but it's walleye is the big one there. So it's probably the walleye.
Yeah.
they literally have walleye fish festivals and stuff along Lake Erie. So
There you
uh,
go.
yeah, yeah,
Out
yeah.
of all the places you visited, not necessarily lived in, what's been the most influential?
Wow. I mean, I'm going to give you a multi-level answer on that.
Okay.
Because I'm in media, Los Angeles is the center of all creativity, in my opinion. Um, Everything that I need to do in and around LA, it's the center of creativity. New York City is the financial center for many businesses, including media. And so New York and LA would be the most influential on my career. Um, Places I just love to visit. I mean, there's so many.
Yeah.
Uh, I have friends in Australia, New Zealand, from when I consulted there, because we used to have clients in both countries. And, they would come to visit and they would say, we're going to be in LA and then we're going to be in New York. Are you going to be around? Can we meet you?
Yep.
And I would often say to them, how many times have you been in New York and LA? Oh, we've been in America 3 times. Okay, this trip, go to Denver and New Orleans.
Yeah.
Or this trip, go to Seattle and
Dallas.
Miami.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just look, I just tried to look for, because in America we get spoiled. The country is so big and it was settled by so many different nations.
Yeah.
Australia, New Zealand, they were all British.
Yeah.
And all the towns have great influence from England or the United Kingdom. But in America, I mean, we have, as crazy as the Vikings who made it all the way to Minnesota, you know, before they realized there was no more big lakes.
Yeah.
And
They
they
ran
just
out of lakes.
yeah. Or New Orleans, which was French and Spanish, and California, which was Spanish, and Mexico, and so on. So I mean, it's huge diversity um, around the country. The Irish in Boston
Miami with the
and
Dominicans and the
yeah,
Cubans.
yeah, Miami, Dominicans, Cubans.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really crazy. And you get to places like Texas and New Mexico. And I remember visiting a radio station I was consulting in San Antonio, and I'm talking to the employee whose last name is Rodriguez. And I said, I don't want to make an assumption. Are you Hispanic by descent? He went, oh, yeah. And I said, Mexican? He goes, yeah, Mexican. And I said, where's your family from? And he said, well, here. And I said, no, I don't mean Texas. I mean, we're in Mexico. And he went, this was Mexico.
Yeah.
And so that's something that people in other countries can't relate to.
Well, yeah. I mean, you go to, Japan's what, 97% Japanese.
Yeah.
So it's hard for them to. Just like I think it's gonna be weird when I go there, 'cause I had a trip planned for April of 2020 with both my daughters. Anyways.
Yeah.
It's gonna be interesting to go to a country that's 97% one race, whereas you come here, especially I'm in Los Angeles, it's about as a mix as you get.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It was interesting. One of my Australian clients made an innocent statement, and it could be taken wrong, and I don't mean for it to be taken wrong. But he had not visited the southern USA, the flyover states. He'd not been to Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina. And so I arranged for him to visit some radio stations in Charlotte, North Carolina, then to go down to Atlanta, Georgia, and then to go further down and visit my client in Columbus, Georgia, before heading on down to Miami. And he said to me, it's interesting to me that people of color in the North sound like Southerners. And so I had to explain the history and socioeconomics and social white people from the South moved in the North for jobs over 100 years ago, and so on. And so America's got amazing history and geography.
I was going to say, it's got to be interesting being in the radio business to see the demographics of every area. I mean, if you're talking Mobile, Alabama to LA to San Diego to Hawaii I mean, that's quite, you get to see that the radio people get to see the demographics better than anybody, I would think.
Oh yeah, and there's so many easy mistakes to make.
Yeah.
People who when one of the jobs I didn't mention is I oversaw programming and content for Cumulus Media and Westwood One Radio Network for about almost 9 years, leaving not long before the pandemic. And because of that global picture and seeing research in all the markets, I could see exactly what you're referring to.
Yeah.
And at one point, we had an air talent on in New York City who is second or third generation Puerto Rican. And, one of the market managers decided that this person should also be simulcast into Los Angeles. And, I had to explain there's a very big difference between a Hispanic from Puerto Rico and a Hispanic from Mexico. And there's nothing discriminatory on it. It's just sociological differences.
Yeah.
And even some of the words and the accent.
Even some of the slang and all that's different.
Exactly, is very different. And so we do see those things. We also see, conversely, age issues. Cities and areas like the one I'm in, Cleveland, Pittsburgh, Buffalo, Detroit, the Rust Belt is losing people every year. They're moving to, warmer climates and more progressive. And during the time that I was working with Cumulus, the wife and I had a condo in Atlanta, and I would, be down there for 2 weeks, come home, go back and forth. Atlanta is such a vibrant city where while Cleveland has many things to be proud of and growth, it doesn't have the same feeling of vibrance. You don't see cranes in every direction you look.
Nashville's got a lot of cranes right now.
Oh, yeah. You go to Nashville, there's cranes everywhere.
Yeah, Atlanta too.
And so, those cities are building new skyscrapers and growing. Cities in the Rust Belt where I am are not. And so that changes media and how we approach and the stories we tell.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. I've been I use Sirius XM when I travel because I'm traveling through different time zones, different areas and all that. So it's easy for me to not have to change an FM or AM radio station. But you're still very bullish on what is it? Terrestrial radio, I guess they call it.
Yeah, and the reason I am is this: if anybody ever needed a PR firm to help them with their image, it's radio, because when you talk to radio, when you talk to people about radio, people who aren't in our business about radio, their impression is that in 10 years it'll be gone. And I've had people say to me, what are you going to be doing in 5 to 10 years when radio's over? And radio has diminished. As one of my friends responded to one of my Radio Inc. articles recently, radio's leaking a lot of oil.
Yeah.
But it's still 88% of the population of the United States listens to the radio every day.
Yeah.
And so, they don't listen as many hours as they used to. They don't listen to as few stations as they used to. But there's still a huge opportunity, a huge listening audience out there. My belief is that at some point, radio will have failed bad enough economically that the bigger companies will be able to figure out how to have a financial model that clears fewer commercials. Because that's really the problem, right?
Yeah.
When you listen to radio and they stop and they play 12 minutes of commercials, 20 messages, you're out.
Yeah.
You've left.
Day and age, it's like I'll just switch that easy.
But I use the free Spotify service on my app on my phone.
Yeah.
And I'm okay listening to 2 commercials every 30 minutes.
Yeah, that's not too bad. But it's interesting. My first car was a '62 Ford, and the AM radio still worked. It was two radios, and so it was a pain. You couldn't just reach over and press a button and change stations. You had to like roll the dial, and then you kind of had to find it. It's like so you would just leave it there. It was too much of a pain in the butt to try and find a new station. Nowadays, I mean, my phone has more music on it than my radio used to.
Well, my grandchildren, the 2 granddaughters I have, will crawl in my wife's car and, use the app. They just commandeer the phone,
Yeah.
the radio rather, in the car, and they use their app and they Bluetooth and right in. And what's crazy is they will listen to the local top 40 station here, which is called KISS 96.5. They'll listen to it, but on the app through their phone
Yes.
into the dashboard. And no matter how many times I go, guys, I can just hit the button. It's right here. No, we're good. We're good.
Yeah.
Because it's what they're used to.
Absolutely.
And so if the rating company could figure out how to capture that listening, on the meter,
Yeah.
that would show more ratings than what radio currently shows as well.
Well, the potentiality of it, somebody in Cleveland could listen to Ryan Seacrest in the morning here in LA through
Yes.
the app.
Yep.
So if it's not picking that up, his numbers aren't the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or Mark and Brian or any of the, I mean, I'm older, but
Yeah.
But
no, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it is absolutely the way people use the radio.
Yeah.
But I am bullish on radio, only from the standpoint that I know it has amazing connectivity. It's not like the print newspaper on paper that's gone away.
Yeah.
It is like you reading your newspaper on an app now, because I can hear that Ryan Seacrest show over the air, or I can get it on an app. I can hear it on demand.
Yep.
I can hear it as a podcast. And so radio is still there, and the many platforms it's using is still there.
Sure.
I can hear it on my smart speaker. But, again, I go back to, we really need a PR firm that's going to help us get over our inferiority complex.
Is that the role of McVay Consulting as the PR firm?
No, McVay Media Consulting focuses more on, we coach talent, we help singer-songwriters, we help radio stations decide what content they have on the air, should that be music or spoken word. Spoken word meaning sports talk stations or news talk stations, podcasting. One of the companies that I consult is called Benstown, and it's a branding company based in LA. And Benstown, has white labeled podcasts for Nat Geo, Disney Plus.
Sure.
And so, those are the kind of things I do. Or I've done coaching for some very big talent, or, a lot of conferences, a lot of public speaking engagements.
Yeah.
At Podcast Movement, back in April, I interviewed ESPN's Stephen A. Smith on stage. Stephen has a podcast out through Cadence 13, which is called No Mercy, KNOW, No Mercy.
Gotcha.
And I think they might be changing the name of it just to the Stephen A. Smith podcast. But Stephen is an amazing talent who's beyond knowledgeable on sports, who has great opinions and insight on social media and news concepts and topics. And so that's what his podcast is about. But those are the kind of things I'm doing that are beyond, picking some records to be played on the radio.
Yeah. Well, it's always been interesting. Like they had the morning drive time, and that in LA, that was Mark and Brian. You had Rodney on the Rock and Richard, some of the, and they always did interviews for the most part. And Howard Stern was actually 98.7 out here for a while, or 97.1, I don't forget. But it's kind of, at least in my mind, has changed to. I couldn't tell you current DJs anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. It sounds like you're a Sirius XM listener.
Yeah.
And so, if you are, then you probably wouldn't be as aware. Howard Stern has been, a huge tentpole for Sirius XM.
Yeah, it was big news when he switched.
Yeah. And he brought a lot of audience with him.
Yeah.
If you do focus groups in a market, it's questionable how many people in a focus group will know of Howard today, because he's not been in free over-the-air radio for some time.
Yeah.
To anybody who's willing to pay, and by the way, there's more and more people willing to pay today than ever before. And so if you're willing to pay, then he's someone who is known. He can be a person who is known.
Yeah. Yeah, that's it. It's interesting though.
Oh yeah, totally. Totally.
to see the whole change. I was after 50 plus years or whatever in the radio and traveling. How has traveling changed for you?
There's probably a couple phases of travel you could look at. And I'm sure as much as you travel and what this podcast is based on,
Yeah.
all of the people who listen will relate to it. Pre 9/11,
Totally different world.
I could walk to the gate,
Yeah.
meet my wife and kids as they came off of a plane.
Yeah. With your shoes on.
Yeah, with my shoes on. um, and so anybody could just walk in and you walk to the gates or wherever you're going
Yeah.
and you're there. Today, since 9/11, let me back up. Then the next phase was 9/11. And at first, it was absolutely terrible trying to travel.
Yeah.
And you tried not to make eye contact with a TSA agent, as if you did, then they'd motion you over
Yeah. Yeah.
and go through your bags. And because they had a quota, and here's somebody who's not going to yell at me, they looked and smiled. Hey, come here.
Come on over.
And then they finally figured it out. And so now we have TSA with clear. And if you travel a lot like we do,
Global entry.
you get global entry and you get the clear and you do all that. And you have the special credit card that gets you into the clubs. You use your miles to get into a club. And right now, Delta's evaluating how they're going to continue the clubs because now there's lines outside the clubs.
That's what I just heard.
And so, but all of those things have improved it. It's never easy. I'm not one of those people who's all dramatic. Since 9/11, by the way, I've never had a bag lost, knock on wood. I know they still get lost. I know they still get lost because I hear about it from people.
Yeah.
But before 9/11, I was good for 2 a year. where the bag would show up at the hotel the day you're leaving.
Yeah.
And you've already had to go buy new toiletries and a couple new shirts.
It's in Minnesota, but it'll get to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And since 9/11, knock on wood, I've not had that happen. But I've never been, when you travel a lot like many of us do, you're going to have delays. You're going to have, weather situations.
Yeah.
And there's always that person who wants to yell because the plane's delayed because of a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
And there's just nothing the pilot or the flight attendants can do.
Or like I was in Denver one time heading to Dallas and they had to de-ice the plane. And I'm like, well, what do you, and people, you could hear mumbling. I'm like, you don't want them to de-ice the plane? I want them to de-ice the plane. Take your time, do it right, get all the ice off the wings before we try and take off and fly. I'm good with that.
Yeah. And so
kind of important.
When you travel a lot, I think you just kind of accept it and that's what's going to be. And so I'm not that person. And I'm also, I am a work in progress on me my entire life. But I'd like to think I'm a good human. And there's always that person who's in first class and there's an empty seat beside them. And then the mother's in first class, also a couple seats back. And the guy doesn't want to give up 1A.
Yeah.
The mom sit beside the kid or whatever. And, I'm that guy that will move around or try to keep families together. The one thing I did that I may never do again, because it was miserable, was give up an aisle seat in Comfort Plus to move back around into a middle seat so the mother could sit somehow, the mother and the kid had two middle seats.
Oh,
and by kid, 5 years old or something, way too young to not be sitting next to the mother. How the airline did that, I don't know. But being a grandpa, I just looked at the mother and said, I'll swap seats with you. And the flight attendant even came over to her and said, I want you to know I've never seen that happen. Except a middle seat for that. But, and I say, I don't know if I'll do it again. I'm probably a sucker who would do it again.
I've done it.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think the airline should be allowed to separate parents like that.
I was trying to think real quick. When you check in, does it know that it's a 5-year-old? I guess I don't
I
know.
don't know the answer to that. I mean, I would guess they would have to.
Yeah, I guess you'd put the age in now.
Yeah, because it
I mean,
would
but back
say
in the day, you didn't. I mean, you would just buy a ticket
yeah,
for,
company child. Yeah, and it was not long ago. It was, I'm
yeah,
talking 2018 or 19 that I did that.
yeah.
But somehow, I mean, and maybe that parent had an emergency and had to change a flight, and they
Well, yeah, and then you get last minute, things happen. I've been pretty fortunate because I usually fly by myself, but then when I've been able to take my wife, we've always gotten next to each other. But the last minute flights and all that, sometimes there's one seat here, one seat there, one seat there.
well, my mother raised me right. I have
Obviously.
I have seen those guys that'll get on and sit down in first, and their wife walks right by them. On back to Comfort Plus or Coach, and I've been like, dude, really? Hey, we flipped a coin.
Wow. I would lose that coin toss every time, just even on purpose.
Yeah, like I said earlier, my wife is a strong woman, so I'd be,
Yeah.
honey, you sit up front. No, I don't want to. No,
I know.
please.
Yeah, yeah. I don't want to hear about this in 8 years.
Exactly. When she's standing on the oxygen hose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I would definitely do the same thing. Yeah, so I was going to ask you too, traveling pre 9/11, even pre computers, pre cell phones, everything else. I remember reading the Skyways mag from front to back and back to forward because there was not a lot to do. Now there's so much you can do. Do you find yourself trying to be more productive for work, or do you shut down when you're flying to California or wherever?
Um, if it's a weekend flight, I will read or listen to a book on audio or watch a movie. But weekday flights are for work. And I've always been productive, even back to the days when I would hold my little dictaphone
Yeah,
and
yeah.
would dictate a memo or whatever as I flew. And I mean, I was that guy. I had two assistants. I would go back and give them the tape, and they'd sit there and listen
Type
and
it out. Yeah.
what I said. And so I always had viewed that as time that if I'm productive and I do my work on the flight, then it's more free time when I'm home.
Yeah.
And so I've always maximized it. I'm also a guy who won't drink on a flight unless it's for a vacation or a weekend. And I do drink, but I just won't do that because then I'm not going to be productive. And
See, I'm the
if
same way.
I had one glass of wine, then it's like, I wonder what's on TV.
But for me, like because I travel so much by myself, it's like I just want to be coherent wherever I'm going. Like, I mean, I don't want anything like if I'm going to a city I've never been to, I want to know that I'm going to end up where I'm supposed to end up.
And not get hit with a baseball bat.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm
I
with you.
mean, you end up. I've definitely ended up in some sketchy neighborhoods. So, but yeah, I'm like you. I'm like for work, I'm work, and then vacation's different.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Agreed.
Uh,
Vacation, somebody's Ubering me so I don't have to drive.
yeah. Well, I always tell people like I work at the rodeo in Vegas every year, and it's 16 days where I'm staying at a hotel in Vegas. I drink more in those 16 days than I do the other 50 weeks because I'm not driving.
Yeah,
We're getting
yeah,
shuttled everywhere, so I can drink, but that's a little different. That's the only time.
I get it.
One thing I was going to ask you, and for my listeners, not so much the viewers, at what point do you go? I mean, you're incredibly current and hip on everything that's going on, and you've been in the business for 50 years. You don't have the mentality of, well, I know everything, and I've been there. I've met everybody. I don't, you're very humble. You're still learning.
Thank you.
Is that kind of the secret to your longevity?
Maybe I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I know that this is my golf game. I don't golf.
Right.
And so, the adage that we've all heard, if you love what you do, then you'll never work a day in your life. I mean, I really love what I do. And every day is truly different. It's all varied. I mean, I feel like I won a contest. I get to go to concerts. I'm backstage meeting celebrities. I meet people that are way smarter than me, and I'm intelligent enough to shut up and listen. The Abraham Lincoln quote, which I'm paraphrasing, I would rather say nothing and be thought a fool than say something and prove that I'm a fool.
Yeah.
And so, those things I learn, I file away. I try to remember them so I can use them to my advantage for my clients, for people who pay me.
Right.
And I am always, there's at no point do I sit down and go, I've got to learn about artificial intelligence so I continue to be hip. I'm a curious person.
Yeah.
So I want to know about all those things. And my God, think of the businesses we're in. You just said you go to the rodeo and work for 16 days. I mean, that's like winning a prize. That's like winning a prize.
It's especially when I tell people part of my territory is Hawaii, and they're like, "Oh, yeah, great."
Yeah, you and I spoke on offline before we started recording about both of us having Hawaii work experiences. It is a tough place to work.
Yeah.
Because the employees have a different work ethic. There is that mahalo kind of
HT time, Hawaiian time
kind of thing. Yeah. And the other part of it is that, because it feels like a vacation, you have to be really disciplined to work and focus. But again, I never want to take for granted what it is I do and what people pay me to do.
Yeah.
It's a privilege to do the kind of work I do.
I get it. I mean, I get that every time I talk about Hawaii. Oh, you're so lucky. I'm like, well, I island hop because I had stores on 4 different islands. So I'm on Oahu for 1 day, then I go to Maui for 2 days, and then I go to the Big Island for 2 days, and I go to Kauai for 1 day. And that's a lot of flights, a lot of hotels, a lot of rental cars. So it's work. I had a buyer in Maui calling sick the day I showed up.
Oof.
I'm like, I flew 2,500 miles to come see you. How sick are you? But things happen on the road.
Have you been to Molokai?
No.
Yeah, that's a good one. You got to visit that next time you're in Hawaii. Find time to go over there.
Yeah, I've looked at it a lot, but I've never been on it.
Yeah, it is. It's a tiny, tiny island. One of the first trips that my wife and I made to Hawaii, the first trip actually went to Oahu because everybody says if you're going to Hawaii, then your first trip, spend it in Oahu, and then you'll never go back.
You never go back. Exactly right.
And so we were on Oahu for about 3 or 4 days vacationing, probably about 3 days. And I said, this feels like Miami Beach. It doesn't know what I thought it would be. And so we went into the concierge and I said, I would really like somewhere remote. Where can we go that feels like we're in Hawaii? And without looking at a piece of paper, he went, Molokai.
Yeah.
I said, really? He said, yeah. Do you want to go? Yeah. I can hook you up for tomorrow. And so we flew in a little 4-seater plane, landed on a dirt runway.
Yeah.
Stayed in a cabana, had a day where we were on the beach and there was nobody there. And so that's a place to go when you want to feel that native resort thing. And it has all the comforts of home.
Yeah.
But
it's interesting because I go to the Big Island a lot. And I mean, it's like 2 different planets. You got the Hilo side, which is the wet side, and then you got the Kona side, it's the dry side. And I try and tell people it's 100+ miles around. It's not like just around the corner. It's a drive.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we've been to all of the primary islands and every one of them is different.
Yeah.
And Maui's my favorite. I mean, Maui is my favorite, and the Wailea side of Maui is
that's where we stay too. Yeah.
Where's your store at? Where is your?
Well, it used to be right by the airport, and then up country I had one in Makawa, which is where they do the rodeo every year in Maui. We used to sponsor that, and then we sponsor the rodeo on the Big Island at Parker Ranch.
Wow.
So
Parker Ranch, that's huge. That's fabulous.
Well, yeah. I always tell people, when Hawaii was annexed into the United States, Parker Ranch was the largest cattle ranch in the United States. And they're like, what?
Yeah, nobody believes it because it's on an island. But to your point, it's a big ass island.
Yeah, they ski at the top of the. They were snowboarding this year because they had so much snow at the top. And I'm lucky. I'm probably like you, where I get to choose to a certain extent when I get to go.
Yeah.
So it's always different. Like I don't go in the summertime and I don't go at Christmas time. So I try and avoid the heavy tourist times. So when I go, it's a little easier to get around and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any place you haven't been to that you still is on your bucket list?
It's more events. I mean, I went to the Indy 500 for the first time this past Memorial Day.
Saw that. It's pretty cool.
That was a great event that I'd never done before. Where would I like to go that I've not? Well, you know what? I'd like to go to Italy.
Okay.
The wife and I have been in Portofino in the south of Italy on the Mediterranean, but we were visiting Cannes and Monaco and just went on around. But I'd like to go to Rome. Not been to Rome.
Right.
Rome would be a place I'd really like to go to. We had a family vacation. The oldest daughter had just left college. She graduated college. The younger daughter had just graduated high school. And my wife had said, hey, we need to take a family vacation. Before we know it, the girls are going to be married. They're going to be out on their own. We're never going to do it. And the wife and I had been to Europe a couple times, number of times, 4 or 5 times, but we never, we went to Madrid, but didn't take the girls. We went to London, and we really like Paris and we like Monaco, and we'd done that a couple times. And so we planned a life vacation to take the girls,
sure,
a week in London, a week in Paris, a week in Monaco, and a week in Rome. And Rome, we were set to be at the Hotel Hassler at the top of the Spanish Steps. And I was Chevy Chase in European Vacation.
Hello.
Until we got to Monaco. After a couple of days, our girls went, yeah, we talked about it. Mom, Dad, you guys go on to Rome. We're going to stay here and we'll meet you back. We'll meet you back in London. And we're like, you're 18, you're 21. No.
Yeah. Monaco on your own, not happening.
No, you'll be in white slavery. Yeah. We'll never see you again. And so we just extended our stay a little bit longer in Monaco, then went back to London for a day and went home. And so we didn't
get the Rome part.
Yeah, but I was that guy that was like, we're going to the West End. We're going to go see theater. Let's go.
Yeah.
We're in Paris. We're going to the Palace of Versailles. Let's go.
Well, I was thinking of when they go to the Grand Canyon. He's like, yep, okay.
So they were done. They were over it.
Yeah.
And so the wife and I have not been back there yet, but maybe for one of our big wedding anniversaries.
There you go. Got to make it happen.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you think travel is easier now than before? And I'll give you in the sense of pre 9/11 and everything, pre computers, internet, you pretty much had a travel agency. You had to call up and say, I'm going to Australia. Where do I stay? Or, but now everybody you can do Google reviews and YouTube. You can actually watch and see where you're going. You can check online different flights.
Yeah. So from that standpoint, it is easier. Actually, a lot of standpoints. I mean, I remember the comedian who joked and said, I've got a green pen. I can just circle and put myself in first class.
Yeah, I could do that.
Yeah, you'd have those printed. And so it is easier. Clear and TSA and, Global have all made it easier to travel. There's more comforts than there were if you know what you're doing and where you're going.
Yeah.
There's more comforts. The travel agent we used forever back in the day, we're still friends with that woman's daughter-in-law who's running the business. And we would call her, though, if we were going to go to, Vancouver. We might call her and say, what do other clients say? What have you heard? Where should we stay in Vancouver? Just because if I go look at, like in Paris, the Georges V, which is a Four Seasons hotel, there's negative reviews as well because somebody's Vichyssoise was cold.
Yeah.
Supposed to be cold. And so we'll still call the travel agent for that, but we don't do it for plane tickets or any of those things. No.
Yeah. It's
all that stuff I can do on my phone.
I just interviewed a girl who just graduated, got her master's from Notre Dame, and she started a luxury travel app for people that want to travel the luxury life. She has pulled together a whole bunch of travel agents around the world. And so she put this app together where people can find it. So it's interesting to see. It's the travel agents of the 2000s.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing though that I might consider though. Like I said, if the wife and I were going, when we took that trip, travel agents were still being used with the kids. It was probably about 2010. And so travel agents were still being used, maybe 2008, something like that. And so there was value there because, not only did they get us the best hotels, our suites were guaranteed, we knew what room we were getting, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Today in the app, I can request a type of room and I can do all those things, but that doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Oh, you hope. There's a lot of hope, right?
Exactly.
I showed up in Dallas in January, in my hotel. They had overbooked by like 60 rooms. I mean, it wasn't even close. I'm like, well, I've already paid for my place. Where am I staying tonight? And they had to book me all the way from basically Love Field in Dallas all the way out in Arlington by the Cowboy Stadium.
I would be so upset over that.
It was interesting.
Yeah, I would be pissed. There was a book some years back called Swim with the Sharks, written by Mark McCormick, who had, I think he started ICM, the agency, the agents, sports agents, and so on. And in the book, he had an idea that I actually did and it worked once. And that was he was checking into a hotel and they said, we're overbooked. And he just put $100 bill on the counter and said, are you still overbooked? And the guy said, let me look and see. Oh, you know what? There's a room that's open.
I wonder how much
you made it somebody else's problem.
That'd be a $200, $300 bill now?
Maybe today now.
Yeah.
But when I did it, it worked for $100.
Yeah.
I saw that and I checked into a Hyatt in Greenville, South Carolina. And they said, we're sorry. That it wasn't that they didn't have a room for me. I wanted a king. And they were like, we have no kings left.
2 fulls or something, yeah.
Yeah. And so I put a $100 bill up there and said, do you think you can find a king? And the guy went, oh my goodness, a king just opened up. Somebody who had a king got stuck in 2 queens.
So that's Mike McVay's travel tip is carry $100 bill with you.
Now that was a few years ago. So to your point, it would probably be 200 or 300. So I wouldn't do it now.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what I would do that has saved that problem for me is if I land at 3:00, if I land at noon, doesn't matter what time I land. And some client says, we're going to go to the office and we'll have dinner and run you by the hotel. I go, no, I want to go by the hotel and check in. Because otherwise
that was the mistake I made.
Yeah. Otherwise you're either SOL when it comes to your room or you're right beside the ice machine or the elevator.
Which we've all been. That's literally what happened. I went to work and then I was like, well, I'll just check in after. And then I had a sales meeting. So I'm like, well, I'll do the sales meeting. And then I got to the hotel like at 10:00 at night and they're like, we're booked. We're full. And I'm like,
from the airport, I don't care what time I land, even 10:00. If they go, well, you don't have any rooms yet, I'll check my bag with them. I'll check in.
Yeah. Give me a room as soon as it's available.
Yeah. They're going to give me the type of room and I always give my cell number. I will, by the way, often act like, well, I'm going to be at the cafe across the street, or I'm going to be right down, so that they call me to tell me my room's ready.
Yeah.
I can then talk to them and make sure I got a room that I want.
There's the training tip. So $100 bill and check in before you do anything else.
Yeah. Well, the one today would be check in before you do anything else.
Yeah. Yeah. Plus the $100 bill.
Yeah. It could help.
It can't hurt. It might not get you. Yeah. Hawaii, California, there's New York City. They'd all have to be a couple $100, but.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The smaller markets, maybe.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, I appreciate the time. I don't want to eat up any more of your free time, which is very limited. What's the best way for my listeners to follow up and see what Mike's got coming up?
Yeah, you can follow me on social media, being LinkedIn, Instagram, Twitter, at Mike McVay, MikeMcVay. I actually got my name.
Perfect.
Um, for email, it's Mike McVay, MikeMcVay, at McVay Media, MCVAY Media, MEDIA.com.
Yeah.
Mike
I'll make sure I
McVay.
have all the links on my website as well.
Yeah, and visit my website, which is also McVayMedia.com.
Yeah. And for my listeners, just so they know, so I think it is every Monday, right? You put out a little
Yeah,
cheat
and
sheet
Radio
for
Inc.
people.
Yeah.
It's awesome.
Yeah. I have two weekly publications. I have two publications involved in weekly. Radio Inc. every Monday. I have an article that's in there, and you can subscribe to Radio Inc. I don't think the daily costs anything. It might, but I don't think it does.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's Radio Inc. RADIOINK. Um, and then the other one you're probably not going to care about, but it's called Monday Morning Intel. And Monday Morning Intel is a music publication. And so I have a column that comes out every Sunday night where I'm talking about what songs are showing good research, what listeners are responding to, et cetera.
Do you ever get? I want to ask
No, ask.
the songs that go viral on TikTok. There are many people that have gotten one-hit wonders just through TikTok, and through a 15-second clip or a 30-second clip. I mean, there's several artists that I've now followed because I heard their. Do you discuss the viralness of songs now?
Oh yeah, streaming matters. Not just to TikTok.
Yeah, but
if we see a song blow up on Spotify or Amazon or Pandora, then you look at it, then you take it serious and go, here's one that people are actually selecting. They're purposely saying, I want to hear this song. In the old days, when I started in radio, there were record stores and people had records.
You go put your headphones on.
Plastic 45 things. And so we would track what people were buying. And then some years later, CDs came out and we would track what people are buying for CDs. Now we look at downloads and we look at what's streaming. And so what songs are people downloading on Apple Music, Pandora, Spotify, etc.?
Yeah.
Songs are they listening to? What are they streaming? And so, yeah, that influences us for sure.
Do you think it's easier or harder for musical acts to get noticed now?
It's harder. Even though there's social, well, let me back up. Let me rephrase that. Let me put an asterisk. If you are saying, and there are artists who say this, I'm an artist, I want to play music. If I can just support myself,
that's enough.
Not have to work in my life, I'm happy. And so if that's your approach, you can do that. If you're an artist who's any good, there will be people who will buy your CD. Yep. If you're good enough to perform in public, there are businesses that will pay you. You just may not be wealthy. You might most likely be middle income or upper low income, but beats working at the Ford plant.
I've talked to a few on my show.
Yeah,
they've never had a job in 40 plus years.
Yeah, and that line came to me from a guy named Max Carl, who was the lead singer of 38 Special left along the way, and Max became the new lead singer. And he was an employee of the band. The band paid him to be the lead singer.
Sure.
He wrote the song Second Chance. So if you ever have an opportunity, look at 38 Special, Second Chance. Max Carl wrote that song. Max is the one, we became friends. He said to me once, look, if you can make a living playing music and you never have to work at another job, then you've had a successful career as a musician. And so if that's the qualifier, then yes, social media and everything can help artists because there's so many opportunities like that. But if it's to become a celebrity, to become a huge number one selling artist, it's so very tough. And it's on the end of this pen. That's the opportunity. It's about as big as the end of that pen. And American Idol ruined it for everybody. Meaning, prior to that, record labels might say, hey, this woman sounds pretty good. I see her playing in the bar. She performs well. I'm going to sign her. Now it's all big business. And so a label head will say, I've got room for 3 men. I've got room for 2 women. I've got room for 2 bands. That's it. So if I'm going to sign somebody else, they better be better than one of these other artists I have. And that, by the way, is why you see artists move also.
But then, because like you said to me, that artist might have the potentiality to be phenomenal, but if they're not given an AR person and brought through the ranks because
Right.
they want the success now.
Exactly.
Where are your streams at? What are your accounts at now versus where could it be if brought in? That's interesting.
Exactly right.
Oh, so I don't want to get off any more tangent. I really appreciate the time. I love talking to you, though.
Thank you, Peter. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate the time.
I'll see you at an airport somewhere.
Exactly. Bye-bye.